wonderful episode of Mind Over Masculinity, where we dig beneath the surface of what it really means to lead, to live, and grow as men in today's world. So, dear listeners, leadership is often painted as a kind of power, authority, or results, you can say. Like, but behind the titles and the corner offices, men in leadership roles often wrestle with the challenges that they don't easily talk about, which is the weight of expectations, the trap of ego, the fear of failure, and sometimes the blind spots that keep them stuck. Yep. And dear listeners, today we are joined by someone who doesn't just teach leadership, she transforms it. Please welcome my guest, Maren Perry. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Amazing, amazing. So, dear listeners, before we delve deep into the discussion, I'd quickly love to introduce you with Maren. So, Maren is the founder and CEO of Arden Coaching. For nearly 2 decades, she worked with senior leaders at some of the world's most recognizable organizations, helping them grow in ways that actually stick. Not through the buzzwords or trust falls, but through practical, human centered leadership development that changes people and, by extension, entire organizations. Yep. So, dear listeners, I'll not take much of your time. Let's get into the discussion with one and only Maren. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
Amazing. So Maren, uh, I mean, let's start with this obvious thing. Like, many men in the leadership avoid that. What do you see as the most common pitfalls men leaders fall into when it comes to developing themselves? So, uh, what do you have to say on this?
Oh gosh. Well, how long do you have? I mean, I think it, first of all, let me say I'm a huge fan of men. I'm married to one. I'm raising two boys. So, um, I think that these conversations are really powerful that you're having, and I appreciate you doing this. Um, I think it's a huge generalization to say that all male leaders are the same, of course. Um, and I do think it's fair to say that over a couple decades, I've seen some themes. So when you talk about, what are the pitfalls in terms of male leaders and their own development, um, I guess the headline for me is that brilliance is not the same as effectiveness.
Yeah.
Um, and I'd go into detail from there. I would say I have probably five top pitfalls for men. Um, I think the first is that, again, as a huge generalization, but men can fall into the trap of thinking in terms of structure rather than relationship. So, um, just last week, one of our clients said to me, "Well, I don't understand why people don't get it. I had this entire reorganization and they should just do it. I made the decision, it's done." And, he was really thinking of people as their job titles. Like their job is to fall in line, as opposed to their job is to understand. And my job is to uh, help them understand and through relationship,
Mm.
make sure that they are inspired and motivated.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. And also, uh, why do you think that those blind spots are so hard for them to recognize on their own?
Hmm. Well, to be fair, I think that's true for all of us. By their very nature, we can't see behind our own head, right? We can't see the things we don't know what we don't know.
Mm.
Um, But I think the danger is that sometimes the male ego can get in the way of a growth mindset. So, if there's a growth mindset, then people are curious about their blind spots and they're asking for feedback and they're delving into them. Um, but if one's ego is in the way, then you're not curious. And you feel like you have to have the right answer. And I think as leaders, it's particularly dangerous because then they're setting up a culture, right? It's not just them, it's setting up a culture beyond them of performance expectation where there's like a right and a wrong as opposed to a continual learning. Um, I mean, people are going to make mistakes, right? Human beings make mistakes. We make mistakes in business. Um, but if you're not seeking the feedback because you want to grow from that, uh, I think that can be the danger.
Got it. Yeah. I mean, that makes a lot of sense, I'd say, because um, it highlights like how leadership is not just about like being in charge, but also about the courage to look inward, which um, I mean is not always easy for men who have been conditioned to always have the answers, kind of thing. So
Yeah.
yeah, true.
Yeah. And I think sometimes, there's conditioning that men are supposed to, as you say, have the answer or
Yeah.
somehow be self-reliant and do it all themselves, where, they are unconsciously trying to be the hero rather than building a legacy or building a team or, pulling the people behind them. There's too much pressure if you always have to be the star player, and it creates a dependency on you that is hard to replicate, right? That means you always have to show up as the one who's gonna make the three-point shot. That's a tremendous amount of pressure. Um, and I think they sometimes miss the opportunity to be the coach, right? To develop the other people, to bring them along, to be curious, to create a succession pipeline, and to give credit, uh, to those on their team.
True. Yes. And so if we talk about the pitfall, like one pitfall like I often hear about is the very common word, which is ego. I mean, not always the arrogance, but um, the tendency to protect reputation or um, you can say like avoid vulnerability. So, in your experience, how does that ego show up in the male leaders? Like, how do you work with them on it? So, yeah.
How does it show up and how do we work with it? Well, I think you pointed out the lack of vulnerability, which I think is the um, maybe flagship characteristic,
Yeah.
right? That if if one is not willing to share, and I'm not saying, share beyond what anyone wants to know about your personal life. I'm just saying, admit when we make mistakes, share our lack of certainty about something. Um, and have an openness and a space for I don't know. Um, I think if that may be the flagship characteristic of ego, right? Leader ego with a capital E. Um, and how do we work with that? Well, there has to be some willingness, right? There has to be some willingness in that leader to say, hmm, I'm at least curious enough to know what the other option is.
Yeah.
And usually that's because we're able to give them some data about how effective they are or are not, right? We'll do a 360 assessment or some other kind of leadership assessment. And
Mm,
that's kind of what I meant at the beginning about brilliance is not the same as effectiveness,
mm,
that um, it will always bear out in the data. If you ask people about a boss, you will always see the impact of that ego. It will come up in terms of followership,
mm,
right? People, that's not someone's favorite person to follow.
mm,
It will come out in aspects of fear or uncertainty in their direct reports or the people around them, lack of clarity, lack of growth mindset for the organization as a whole. So there are a number of ways it can show up. But by reflecting that data back to the leader, if the leader is saying, I want to be the best I can be, usually they're doing it the only way they know how. They're not trying to be,
mm.
um, a poor leader. They're doing it the best way they know how, they just may not have other tools. And so, the first step is the willingness to say, do you want to shift something if it's going to mean greater followership, greater effectiveness, greater culture for your organization? If that's the thing that's at stake, are you willing to take these other steps? And if they have that willingness, we can work with anyone.
Exactly. That's the amazing part of it. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, uh, uh, also like because this distinction is so valuable, uh, because so many leaders think that the vulnerability will cost them respect when uh, often it earns them more of it. So, uh, but just to understand, like, what's the difference between the healthy confidence and the destructive ego?
Mm. I think you see it in the people around the leader, that healthy confidence inspires others and brings others along, and destructive ego has the opposite effect,
Mm, correct. Yeah. Yeah.
right? That if you have a healthy confidence, people want to be around you. You're charismatic, and people can share in that. And sometimes it can wear off on them in some ways, but the destructive side means that people around you are less than, as opposed to included in.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, the correct word is included. Yeah, correct, correct. Yeah,
Yeah.
lovely. And
And I think it's hard to see from the inside sometimes. Like, people may think that they're confident, and really they come across as aggressive or um, egotistical. They may not have a barometer that is adjusted to other people's perception, which is why we always go and ask other people.
yes, yeah, lovely, lovely. And like, um, senior executives, like, they often claim that they're too busy for coaching or self development, right? So, uh, from there, from your perspective, like, is that a real limitation, or it's just a kind of excuse masking something deeper?
It's a great question. I mean, I don't know anybody
Mm.
who isn't quote unquote busy, right? Everybody's busy. Everyone has things on their calendar. It's really a matter of prioritization. If you look at that, the grid of importance and urgence, that I think it's Stephen Covey, right? The grid um, of what is urgent versus not urgent, and what is important versus not important. Plenty of us waste our time in the things that are not important but urgent. That email that comes across our radar and we have to respond to it, but it's not really important. It's just there. Um, but the category that gets the most traction is that important but not urgent.
Yes.
That's where victory lies, I think, in terms of development, because development is incredibly important. An organization can't outpace its leader. As its leader, you have to keep growing,
Mm.
but it's not urgent. It's not like I have to do it by 2 o'clock.
Yeah.
So if you can schedule for those important but not urgent things, that's where you get traction. And I would put leadership development in that category, important but not urgent. So it has to be discipline
Mm.
to prioritize it on any given, Tuesday afternoon when you have an appointment.
Exactly. Mm. Agree. And okay, so like, how do you break through the resistance without making them defensive?
Mm.
Mhm.
I think you mean like a leader who is resistant to
Mm.
leadership development or coaching or something like that?
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that it's having a conversation about what's important to them. Right now, it's possible that what's important to them is exactly what they're doing, in which case you would get no traction with that person. But if what's important to them is effectiveness, usually there's an in, because you can show that let's just pretend the bloated, egotistical version, although that's kind of a caricature. It doesn't show up that way for most leaders. It's a little more subtle than that. But
Mm.
um, let's just take that caricature because it's extreme. If you can reflect back what is ineffective about that, and usually someone in the organization has that information, right? They know the people who have left, they know the people who talk behind that person's back, they know the impact on morale that that person has, right? That data exists, even before a formal assessment. The organization knows.
Yeah.
Um, and if you can reflect that back, if they're interested in effectiveness, right? They want to succeed, they want their company to succeed, then you have an opening for some willingness. Now, that doesn't mean it's gonna be easy for them, right? Getting that data of, "Wow, you mean people really think that about me?" Or, um, that it's having that kind of impact 3 layers below me, I had no idea. Right? That can be hard to absorb. Um, but I think if you can get through that piece, then it's about skill set and mindset. The mindset is the willingness piece and the willingness to examine the things that you talked about, the vulnerability and looking at myself and what I am bringing to this situation or conversation. And then the skill set, and those things can be learned. It's possible to shift mindset. That's why you have a podcast, right?
Yeah.
That's what you're here to talk about. It's possible to shift mindset, and it's certainly possible to gain a skill set. So it's the key is in the willingness.
Yes. Exactly. Exactly true. Yep. So, yeah. So, I mean, here differently. I'd love to say that, right, that it's less about the time management and all about the priority management, like you mentioned in the beginning, which is very different. Which is really a very different conversation. But obviously, yes, it's very, very true and important as well.
Yeah. Well, the mindset is tricky.
Yeah. Yeah, and if we talk about another challenge for the men, like the men faces in leadership is the pressure to focus solely on the results, right? So, uh, but you have said that leadership is not about the results; it's all about the people. So, why do you think that so many male leaders struggle with their mindset shift?
Well, I I would phrase it slightly differently in that I think that, the results are important. You're in business to get results. You can't ignore the results, right? No stakeholder, no board. They're not going to put up without the results. You need the results.
Hmm.
I just think that the people are a way to the results. Eventually, if you are only focused on results and you don't care who you leave in your wake and you don't care about the turnover, the retention, you don't care about the culture, eventually that costs you money and therefore results. So it's about paying attention along the way so that you're not just burning through, it doesn't matter. Everybody will work here. We pay so much, right? But that's not true forever, and certain companies can last quite a long time on that, but, there is a cost when their glass door score is, super low, um, you know, they may not be getting the best talent anymore because of the reputation they have for burning through people and the culture, and yeah, you can make a ton of money there, but you're not gonna be there more than a year, right? So it can cost you in ways that are not obvious, so I just think that your people are a strategic asset. And if you're not focused on that strategic asset, you're not maximizing your result.
That's very, very important. And um, I mean, I love that. And what's the one practical step that the leaders can take to start putting people before the outcomes while
Mm.
also delivering the results? What do you say?
Yeah. I think that one has to value emotional intelligence
Hmm.
and accept it as a critical strategic skill.
Okay.
Because if you are not learning and growing in that skill yourself, you will not be, as you were saying earlier, vulnerable, relating, listening, right? You risk always being always pushing and never pulling. Um, and so if you want to really leverage the people in your organization, uh, I think that's a personal skill set to foster the emotional intelligence, and then curiosity, because you have to learn what's going on in your organization currently in order to be able to shift it. You have to get the baseline data. So to find out what's happening now and probably do some surveying and assessing, um, and then set your destination and figure out what your gaps are.
Yeah, yeah, true. I love that. Yep. Because at the end of the day, results are the byproducts of relationships. So, uh, yeah.
Mm. Yeah.
And when we're talking about this, I'd love to bring some of the contradictory angles as well. I mean, like some people might argue that focusing too much on people, it actually risks diluting accountability. And uh, if you get too human, performance might actually slip as well. So, how do you respond to that concern?
I say that they're not opposite. You absolutely have to have accountability. I'm not saying don't hold people accountable. I'm saying that maybe the conversation to have about accountability um, takes their humanity into account. Not that you don't hold people accountable, you must, right? People have to perform. And if they don't perform, they don't have a job. Um, but you can have the same conversation, in other words, the same outcome, or the same thing that you communicate, and you can do it in many different ways. The ends of the spectrum might be all, you know, get this to me by X or else, right? That's accountability, one form or another. And then there's, I need this Thursday by 5 o'clock. When do you think you can get it to me before then?
True.
Right. Those are different ends of the spectrum. You're still gonna get the thing by 5 o'clock, but, one leaves someone feeling like a partner, and one leaves someone feeling like a job title.
Exactly. Exactly. So, uh, amazing. I mean, do you think that the leaders sometimes use results as a shield to avoid the harder emotional work of leadership?
The short answer would be yes.
Okay.
I think, uh, I think, it's easy to just say, um, that we need the result or the number. That is absolutely true. You're not in business if you don't have that.
Mhm.
But people are a part of your business unless you're a solopreneur who has a computer,
Yeah.
right? And that computer only talks to other computers.
Mhm.
N there is a I there are people involved in your business, and even a solopreneur, there's still you involved in your business.
Yeah.
So, there are people and humans involved along the way, and we are gray and we are messy. We are not black and white. We are not a computer. We don't always give the same answer when someone comes to us with the same question. So, and we make mistakes, right? But we're also innovative and creative and inspired and related. And so, if you are only going to focus on uh, one aspect of that, you lose the range of color that comes with humanity, and you rely only on the black and white of quote unquote results. But again, I believe that the people are a strategic asset to produce those results. So I don't actually think they're antithetical.
Exactly. Wow. And definitely. And uh, eh, I mean, it reframes the compassion not as a softness, but as a strength. Definitely. So true. And
Yes, and you can give difficult information in a compassionate way, right? You can fire someone compassionately. Compassion isn't soft, it's
mm,
respectful. And again, it's a strategic
mm,
advantage. It's not about results versus
mm,
compassion or empathy, it's results with compassion or empathy.
okay.
And in my belief,
Mm,
it accelerates the results.
mm, true. And like if I say that if a skeptical executive is listening right now, uh, what would you say to convince them to take leadership development seriously?
Hmm. You know, I think that
Hmm.
if they're not interested in leadership development, I wouldn't say anything to them
Okay.
because they're probably not ready.
Hmm.
Um, but if they're somewhat curious, I would say, if you're talking about like them for them personally,
Hmm.
I would say, what do you have to lose? Right? You have everything to gain
Yes.
uh, if you are going to improve and gain skills and be able to be more agile and shift mindset more readily, be more resilient. You have all those things to gain, but you don't have to give up anything. You don't have to give up your current skill set. You'll still always have those. If that's what you'll always have that in your toolkit. No one's trying to take away your hammer, just trying to give you some more screwdrivers and stuff. Um,
Hmm.
so I don't think it's about what like you shouldn't be afraid to lose something, I guess
Hmm.
is the key. Um, that it should be about gaining. And leadership development, the leader is always the one in control. No one is making a leader do anything. They're still in charge of what they do with themselves, what they do with their company. Um, and so it goes back to the willingness, I think, that I was talking about before. And that starts with a little bit of curiosity. What if I could do something better or add tools? What would be possible?
Exactly. And um, also, like you have coached leaders across the industries and the levels from healthcare to finance to sports. Um, if you had to give one piece of advice, especially to the male leaders who want to grow but don't know where to start, what would it be?
Hmm. I think it would be willing to be a beginner.
Okay.
I think that's hard for, you know, excellent leaders who have excelled and who have, achieved so much. Um, Generally, people are willing to be a beginner somewhere. They're willing to be a beginner with their kids playing with Lego, or they're willing to be a beginner on the golf course, or, there's some place where they're willing to be a beginner. But it does mean putting one's ego aside, no matter what it is, gardening or uh, cooking, right? If it's something that you haven't done before,
Yeah.
you always start as a beginner. But that beginner's mindset is
Yeah.
the most open you can ever be. And it's a great place to start.
True. Amazing. Lovely. Maureen, I mean, this has been such an energizing and eye-opening conversation, I'd say. And uh, also love to mention that you have shown us that leadership is not just about the titles or quarterly numbers. It's mostly about people, self-awareness, and the courage to do the inner work that so many men shy away from. So, thank you so much for that. And
Oh, Avik, thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure. Great conversation.
amazing. And for the leaders, and also the listeners who are listening, or maybe you'll be listening, that if you are a leader or many or aspiring to be the one, here's the challenge: that take one insight from today's conversation and put it into a practice this week at least. Whether it's checking your ego, making time for real coaching, or simply listening more deeply to your team, the small shifts can spark the big transformation, I would say. And also remember that leadership is not just about proving you are strong, but it's all about helping others become stronger because of you. So, Marian, if someone wants to connect with you, what will be the great medium to connect?
Oh, well, they can certainly follow us on LinkedIn, which is Arden Coaching, Arden Coaching. And our website is ardencoaching.com.
Amazing. So, dear listeners, what I'll do is I'll put all the links and the details into the show notes for your easy reference so that you can easily reach out to Marine. And Thank you again for joining us, Maren. And for everyone who is tuning in, stay strong, stay open, and keep growing. So, this is Mind Over Masculinity, and I'm your host, Avik. So, until next time, stay healthy, stay happy. Thank you so much.